Manuel Lasker was the world chess champion from 1894 to 1921. It was a span of 27 years, the longest of any world chess champion. He was an incredibly difficult player to beat, but the game I'm about to show you, he lost with the white pieces in under 22 moves. This was a game played 5 years before he became the world champion, so he wasn't quite at his peak, but still a very strong player. He was playing against this person whose name I will not try to pronounce, but they were from Poland, I believe, and also a very good player. You're in for a treat. Let's take a look at the game. All right, so here we go. Lasker was white, and he played the Vienna game. And nowadays, Vienna Gambit is pretty popular, where white plays f4. But Lasker took kind of a slower, more closed-off approach, where he just plays g3, and fianchettos his bishop over here on g2. And it kind of resembles a King's Indian type of setup, but instead of putting the knight on f3, he puts the knight on e2. Okay, it's a little bit more passive, but still very solid. He plays h3, which is interesting, but he's trying to prevent the bishop from coming here and causing some problems. If that knight gets pinned, then maybe black plays knight to d4, and you can imagine there's some potential weaknesses here along the light squares, and so he felt like h3 was a useful move to prevent that. Also, notice the bishop eyeing the f2 pawn. He's stopping the knight from going there as well. So a nice kind of calm move, sort of limits black's options. He plays knight to d5. Pretty common idea of sinking the knight into the d5 square. You've got it supported by the bishop and the pawn, and if black is, not paying attention, they can actually fall for a little trap here where their pieces get forked. But this person played correct move and captured with the bishop, which is fine. And we get this. The knight goes back. He plays c4, defending his pawn on d5. Okay, queen to d7. d4 striking at the center. Pretty logical moves. And actually, both players have played very well up to this point. You can see the eval bar is very equal. Nothing really crazy has gone on here. All right, castles and castles. Both players following opening principles, developing their pieces, castling early. And here is where the game starts to get a little bit interesting. Now, notice one thing. Lasker's a little bit behind in development, right? He hasn't developed his bishop yet. Black has already completed the development and now kind of starts to launch an attack. Lasker trades and plays bishop d2. And again, everything is fine here. But watch what happens. The knight comes in. Now, it's an interesting moment because there's 3 pieces lined up here on the f2 square. And it's not super easy to figure out how to deal with that. Like, yes, you could defend. Like, maybe you would move like bishop to e1. That seems pretty passive, and usually you don't want to trap your rook like that. There's also a little tactic lurking in the position. And actually, maybe I should let you guys pause. If you would like to pause here, what do you think black would have played if Lasker did this to defend? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, it's the move knight takes g3, because this pawn, which looks like it's defending g3, is actually not, because the bishop is pinning it. So that's kind of hidden there. And so because of that, the best thing for Lasker to do here was actually just to trade off the bishop. Now, normally you don't want to give up your King's Indian kind of light squared bishop after you've fianchettoed it, because there's weaknesses here, right? But in this case, that knight was so strong that this was the best thing to do. And then queen to g4, trying to trade off the queens, and the position is still pretty equal, right? That's what needed to happen. But Lasker decided to play the move king to h2. Now, you remember the bishop pin that we talked about. He deals with that problem because now if the knight captures here, the pawn can move, and you just simply take it. But what he doesn't deal with was the attack on the f2 pawn. Now, it's interesting because if black decides to capture this, notice how they're stepping into a pin on the queen, which looks pretty scary and probably is what, Lasker was counting on. Well, this opponent actually captured it. It does attack the queen, and so Lasker plays queen to b3. And now black continues with the very aggressive moves and plays the move queen to h5. So he steps out of the pin, so now the knight can move. But at the same time, notice what's happening here. There's a pin on this pawn, so that knight to g4 check is a potential move for black. And I think that Lasker maybe underestimated that move along with some other stuff that went on in that position, but he played the move queen takes b7, which is a terrible blunder, and black proceeded to very quickly put the game away. So if you would like to pause, what do you think black played next? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, it's the move rook a to b8, and there's a term in chess called a poisoned pawn. This pawn was a poisoned pawn. Essentially, it looks like it's a free pawn. It looks like, go ahead, take it, grab it, eat it if you want. But it's actually poisoned, and if you do that, it's going to come back and cost you, and that's exactly what happened here. The rook comes over. Lasker actually gets 2 pawns out of it. You could say there were 2 poisoned pawns. But why is this so good for black? Because the rook comes down to b2, and notice black's pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4 of the major pieces are lined up on the king, essentially. You've got the knight pretty close. You've got the bishop. You've got the queen. Now the rook is on the second rank, which is super dangerous, hitting both of the bishops and the king. And look at white's pieces. This is like not really doing anything. The queen's not really doing anything. You can't take any of these pieces. They're all defended. It's not helping the king, right? And all of a sudden, Lasker finds himself in a totally lost position. So watch what happens here. He plays bishop to c3, attacking the rook. And black found an amazing combination here. If you would like to pause, what do you think black played? If you had a chance to look at that, the move is queen takes h3 check. It's a beautiful queen sacrifice, giving up the queen. Why? Because after you take, well, he didn't take, but if he would have taken with the bishop, the knight was going to g4, which creates a double check. And after the king moves here, only move, because the bishop is cutting off, the rook comes over for the checkmate. So that was one option. And what happened in the game, Lasker decided to play king to g1. And if you would like to pause here, how do you think black finished off the game? You had a chance to look at that. Queen to h1, again, sacrificing the queen for a second time, forcing the bishop to capture, and knight to h3 is checkmate. It's beautiful stuff. It's actually a double check and checkmate, and I mean, I've got to believe Lasker was shocked by this game. Like I said, he didn't lose often, and so I hope you guys enjoyed that one, and I'll see you next time. As always, thanks for watching. Stay sharp, play smart, and take care.